Hello, it's Ukraine on air, and Marisa Tomaszewska with the Daily News. Russian aviation continues to destroy infrastructure in many regions of Ukraine, mostly by missile and bombing attacks. Heavy damage occurs in the central, eastern, northern and southern parts of the country.
A truck and 2 buildings caught fire in the Obolonsky district of Kiev as a result of Russian military shelling. The State Emergency Service reported that rescuers eliminated the fire. According to the military administration of the capital, 1 person was killed and 3 others were wounded. According to a chairman of Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, 1 person died as a result of Russian troops shelling of Pavlograd in Dnipropetrovsk region. The Pavlograd 2 railway station was also destroyed. 15 freight cars derailed. Traffic through the station was stopped indefinitely. As a result of Russian troops shelling the town of Lozova in Kharkiv region, 1 person died and 9 were injured. The mayor of Lozova, Sergei Zelenskyy, said that 2 of the injured were in serious condition. Additionally, the firing destroyed about 20 private houses.
Russian forces continue their atrocities against the local population and civilian objects in Ukraine's eastern regions. Populated areas in Donetsk and Luhansk regions are subjected to intensive bombing.
On the 22nd of March, Russian troops dropped 2 heavy-duty bombs on Mariupol. The city was subjected to more destruction. This was reported by the Azov Regiment and the Mariupol City Council. The head of the Lugansk Regional Military Administration, Serhiy Gaidai, said that the Russian army shelled Severodonetsk, hitting a school and killing civilians who were standing in line to buy food in a store. According to the State Emergency Service, the military also shelled the Severodonetsk Children's Hospital, which resulted in the building's roof catching fire. The shelling left the city without communications and is severely damaged.
Surrounded by enemy troops, the city of Kherson in southern Ukraine can be echoed as a symbol of national resistance against the unlawful actions of Russian troops.
Regardless of the danger, residents of Kherson and the region daily come out for peaceful protests to show the invaders that Kherson is a Ukrainian city. At the same time, the Russian military again and again resorts to the use of brutal force in order to break the resistance. However, so far they have not succeeded. On the 22nd of March, local residents went to a rally in downtown Kherson with Ukrainian flags. The Russian military began throwing tear gas grenades at them. When the smoke cleared, some Kherson residents decided to return to the square in order to defend their rights.
Russian forces bombed a road bridge over the Desna River in Chernihiv, depriving the city residents of available communication means and a route for receiving humanitarian aid.
On the night of the 23rd of March in Chernihiv, the Russian armed forces dropped air bombs on a highway bridge over the Desna River, which connected the city to the capital. As a result of the strike, one of the bridge sections fell down. The information was confirmed by Vyacheslav Chaos, chairman of the Chernihiv Regional Military Administration. The destroyed bridge was considered important as it was used to transport evacuation vehicles from Chernihiv and to deliver humanitarian aid to the city.
The death toll among the civilian population is growing due to the indiscriminate Russian attacks battering Ukrainian cities.
On the 22nd of March, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights recorded 2,510 civilian casualties in the country. It is estimated that 953 people have been killed and 1,557 injured since the onset of the Russian invasion. As of the 23rd of March, according to data by the Center for International Security, 37 civilians, including 2 children, were killed as a result of the Russian invasion in the past 24 hours. 44 people were injured, including 6 children. 6 civilians were captured, and according to official information, more than 20 civilians were kidnapped or taken captive. The actual figures are considerably higher. Numerous casualties in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, as well as in towns of Izum and Trostianets, cannot be adequately reported and included in the statistics.
enemy continues to abruptly violate agreements on humanitarian corridors, yesterday militants of so-called DPR captured evacuation transport near the city of Mariupol.
Minister of Reintegration of Temporary Occupied Territories Irina Vereshchuk informed that evacuation transport with rescuers of State Emergency Service of Ukraine was captured by Russia-backed militants on the route between the city of Mariupol and Mangush. The humanitarian corridor between the two cities was agreed with the Red Cross, and despite this, militants continue violating existing agreements and capturing, shelling evacuation transport. The minister also said that it is still difficult to estimate the scale of the catastrophe in the drama theatre in Mariupol, which was shelled by the Russian army, because rescuers cannot get there due to constant shelling.
In recent days, several thousands of residents of Mariupol have been forcibly deported to Russia. These are people that were constantly hiding from artillery fire.
Ludmila Denisova, the ombudswoman for human rights in Ukraine, said that the abducted Mariupol residents were taken to filtration camps, where the occupiers forcibly inspected people's phones and documents. After that, some of them were transported to Taganrog and then were transported by trains to various cities in Russia. Russians deliberately don't allow the evacuation of Ukrainian civilians within the territory of Ukraine in order to deport them to Russia. The abduction and forced relocation of people from the occupied territories is a gross violation of Article 49 of the Geneva Convention, which treats these acts as war crimes.
The Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias is willing to accompany the humanitarian mission to Mariupol.
Nikos Dendias has declared he wants to lead a humanitarian mission to Mariupol, which is home to thousands of ethnic Greeks and now surrounded by Russian forces. He pointed out that Greece's priority is to protect civilians and ethnic Greeks living in Mariupol, adding that he had already informed the Ukrainian and Russian authorities about the humanitarian mission. Mariupol has historically had a significant population of ethnic Greeks. At least 10 ethnic Greeks were killed and several wounded after Russia attacked the city.
World growth forecast cut as inflation intensifies due to Russia-Ukraine war.
The outlook for global GDP growth has deteriorated significantly as inflation challenges intensify and Russia's invasion of Ukraine threatens global energy supplies. Fitch Ratings' March 2022 Global Economic Outlook sees world GDP growth reduced by 0.7 in 2022 and sharp upward revisions to inflation forecasts. A potentially huge global supply shock that will reduce growth and push up inflation is hitting the post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the economic sanctions on Russia that have followed have put global energy supplies at risk. Sanctions seem unlikely to be rescinded anytime soon.
Ukraine needs a Marshall Plan to deal with the consequences of Russia's invasion. German Finance Minister Christian Lindner said on Tuesday.
Our support for the Ukrainian people's fight for freedom will continue, Lindner said in a speech to the Bundestag lower house of parliament. Our solidarity with our European neighbor has a lasting basis, and that's why we need an international Marshall Plan for Ukraine. Previously, European Council President Charles Michel said he supported the creation of a solidarity fund for Ukraine to provide basic services and meet the urgent needs of Ukrainian citizens.
The only tank manufacturer in Russia, Uralvagonzavod, stopped its work due to lack of components.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the work of Uralvagonzavod has been suspended due to the lack of foreign-made components. Uralvagonzavod is the only Russian enterprise that carries out serial assembly of tanks, both for the needs of the Russian army and for export. Problems with components also caused failures in the current repair of armored vehicles of the Russian army.
Peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, a wishful thinking or a possible perspective? Poland suggests discussing the idea at the highest political level.
On the 18th of March, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said that Poland would officially propose the creation of a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine at the next NATO summit. The international peacekeeping mission in Ukraine is needed to ensure humanitarian corridors, the security of which is violated by Russia. This was stated by Polish ambassador to Ukraine, Bartosz Cichocki. Cichocki reports that in Poland they understand that there will be no consensus on it at the moment, but there is a conviction that this idea should work in one form or another, being an objectively necessary thing. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg earlier said that an emergency NATO summit would be held on the 24th of March. It will discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The White House said that the US President Joe Biden would attend it.
On March 22, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed the Italian Chamber of Deputies. While speaking in a virtual format, he urged not to hesitate to put pressure on Russia, because the price of delay is unimaginably high: 117 murdered Ukrainian children.
The Ukrainian president's address had a strong emotional impact. Volodymyr Zelenskyy appealed to the feelings of Italians, proposing them to imagine a city of Genoa completely burned, because that is what Mariupol looks like now. President called on Italy to support sanctions against Russia, to impose a complete embargo on trade, starting with oil, and to ban Russian ships from entering Italian ports. At the same time, Volodymyr Zelenskyy thanked Italians for giving asylum and warm welcome to Ukrainian refugees. Italy wants to see Ukraine in the European Union, Prime Minister Mario Draghi said after a video address by the President of Ukraine.
The prospect of an Israeli Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine looms on the horizon. Naftali Bennett apparently wants to mediate a final deal, but urges the belligerent sides to move closer to reaching an agreement on their own.
According to the Israeli media, Prime Minister of Israel Naftali Bennett has accepted the invitation of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to visit the country on the condition that Kyiv will achieve significant progress in the ceasefire negotiations with Russia. The Times of Israel reports that Bennett has already asked the country's security service to begin preparations for his possible visit to Kyiv. Nevertheless, some Israeli security officials expressed concerns about the risks associated with the Prime Minister's trip to an active war zone. Earlier this month, the Israeli Prime Minister visited Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin.
Stand with Free Ukraine. Subscribe for our channel.